So, you want to learn about the ninth house. You want to learn what it means to have planets in that house. Well, if you want to learn about this house, you have to understand a few keywords before I go into this. This is the house of ego inflation. Yeah, you're gonna learn some new keywords here, but other astrologers don't tell you about. Because this is the house of everything that connects you to smashing who you are. Smashing it in such a way where other people feel like you know what you're talking about, like you know what you are doing. You're supposed to be an embodiment of experience. If you have a lot of planets in the ninth house, any planet here operating wants to expand, to have a higher expression, which is quite like almost like a religious devoted expression. Like these are the planets where you devote yourself to. You're very religious about this house because this house is connected to philosophy, the expansion of the mind, and faith. Having faith in yourself, faith that you know you will succeed. Because this is the house that comes after the 8th house. And the 8th house is about deaths, yes, but it's also about rebirths. It's about reconstruction. And after we have reconstructed ourselves successfully and we have created a new identity that is ready for the world outside, right? Because it's different from the first house identity, which is just for ourselves. The 8th house is for an identity that cooperates and works with others. And now we move into the 9th house, where we expand that identity. We find meaning. We find out why it is that we live. We find the purpose of that identity. We find our place in the world. And for that we need vision. Vision which is connected to prophecy. Psychic predictions are found in this house. These predictions have to do with your self-development, because this is the last of the fire element houses. So we are back in the interpersonal realm. One last time before we are finished with the houses. The ego in the first house is just thinking about itself, thinking about, oh, my survival, what do I do? What's the basis for incarnating? What do I need to incarnate? What do I need to do? And the 5th house is about entertainment, enjoying my incarnation, finding the heart of all hearts, finding my passion. But now I have all of that, so I reintegrate myself into the collective consciousness. Myself I integrate. So it's still about me, but how do I find myself in the world, in the group? And usually this happens through higher education, through teaching, or playing a certain role in religion, philosophy, showing people the path, showing them how to live their life. So any planet in this house has to learn how to live their life correctly. And this is the house of faith, so you need to have faith in yourself. You need to believe that what you are doing is the way. And if you believe that, if you are confident of that, then nobody can interfere. Nobody can take you away from your path. So you have a healthy 9th house. This house functions only by pushing one's own beliefs and applying it directly to the external. So while the 1st house deals with your will, applying it so you can dominate and you can survive, in the 9th house it is about finding out how you can push yourself into the world, how you can expand outwards. This is where you find hierophants, town criers, preachers, prophets, you find the archetype of a priest, which is a representative of God. So no longer are you just living for yourself, you are living for a higher purpose. And for that, you need to have understanding. You need to have insight into the laws of the universe, into the higher philosophies. You need to understand what it is that you're doing here. Meaning. In order to be a priest, in order to be a God representative, you gotta be seriously grandiose. This is why the faith of the self is sometimes inflated in this house. We see this especially with people who have a lot of 9th house placements. They learned early on that if they don't completely believe in what they are doing, if they have not complete confidence, if they are unbroken in their dedication to certain philosophies, certain ways of living, then they're not going to be able to assert themselves. So there's a strong faith that we can assert our philosophy onto the world so we don't get distracted. This house is ruled by Jupiter and associated with awakenings of a personal experience of meaning within, of God within. Because essentially it is God what gives meaning, it's religion. But of course we don't have to rely on matrix programs like religions. We can also simply go for a spirituality which is centered on our experience. While 9th houses like to learn about the world around them, they find out that they can't be like the 3rd houser, which takes in information, digests it, regurgitates it, and distributes it. It can't afford to be superficial. Here, everything is personal. It's based on personal experience. It's like the character of a movie or a game. He has to go through certain experiences. He has to go for the first 8 houses. He has to transform first through the 8th house. He has to leave certain things behind in order to find his true self. He has to leave his false self behind. So there's a certain commitment to self-identity here. This commitment is so strong because it needs to be anchored in, needs to be solidified before we can materialize our will, get it into the 10th house, where we have our career. Because our career cannot be successful on a high level if our heart is not in it, if our fire is not in it, our motivation, our faith that this is the way to live, this is the way to push ourselves onto the world. It translates directly into our career. This is why the 9th house is surrounded by the house of transformation, recreating yourself, and the house of status and public recognition, where the self that you created is now finally being recognized because it has been anchored in, it has been centered in the 9th house through philosophy and self-understanding, which is self-actualization. It's like self-awareness. Because again, it's a firehouse. It's about the light of consciousness, which tends to be on a Damocles sword. Because often we're not quite sure who we are. We can't be sure from the beginning. So 9th house planets are usually, they have to go some kind of evaluation. Because they need to get their experiences first before they can go to where they need to go. But of course, this is why we not only find self-delusion sometimes in this house, having a little bit too much faith before your time, but also tunnel vision. That we commit a little bit too quickly, a little bit too easily, because we feel that we have to. We have to commit to a world vision, so we get tunnel vision. This is also the house related to accidents. So going a little bit too fast, too quickly, like Jupiter, it expands and then it's not really looking where it's going. It just keeps on expanding. So this is where we have to learn how to take risks. How to take risks, because we often find gamblers in this house, daredevils, scoundrels, people who push their way of life into the world and who make their own laws. And this is very important, that you have to make your own laws in this house, because otherwise you can't really assert yourself completely. The self-development is not complete before you have your own understanding of what's right and wrong. This is why we often look to religion for morals and ethics, which of course is a poor substitute. And this is usually why the ninth house rules religion, because it's a substitute for something that we need very badly. We need a way of living. This way of living, of course, is about being committed to a singular belief, which is often why we find a certain rigidity in this house and an inability to consider other viewpoints. But this only happens if we are substituting our own views with somebody else's. This is where we become rigid. We can only become rigid because we are not trusting ourselves. We put our faith into somebody else. So you see, this is why the ninth house of having faith in yourself is important. Because if you don't have faith in yourself, then you're going to be questioned and challenged very, very easily. And the only way to avoid being challenged in your beliefs is to fully commit into somebody else's beliefs. Which, of course, is where the delusion comes in, the denial of the self. When we have a healthy ninth house, this is where all of these problems are no more. We are forging our own path. We kind of, we do what we feel to be right. And we trust this feeling. It's something that comes from our spirit. It comes from deep within. And we're no longer relying on our mind, which is opposite the third house. We're no longer relying on knowledge or other people's opinions, our siblings, our family. We don't care what other people say. And we are confident in our own opinion. And once we are confident, we are established. And once we are established, then we are ready to take in other people's viewpoints and consider them again. Because we can't consider anything if we have no sense of direction that we can rely on. If we have to rely on other people, we tend to choose a specific belief, a specific religion, and then go for that, thinking that if we don't invest into religion, then we will not be able to find out what is right, simply because we don't trust ourselves. So again, I emphasize why this is so important, this house, to do what feels to be right. A prime example of a ninth house individual is the fictional character Jolie Bindo from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1. This is a figure, he's an old man who leaves the Jedi Order to follow his own philosophy of what being a Jedi is about. Because he doesn't feel that what the Jedi Order is doing is correct. He trusts his own judgment above all else. Which is why he leaves the Order. He leaves thousands of years of tradition and beliefs behind. And to do that, you gotta seriously be quite grandiose. You gotta be quite confident. This is why Jolie Bindo becomes a grey Jedi. And he never falls to the dark side. And he doesn't get stuck on the light side. He still makes romance, he still finds love, without any restrictions. So he's free of the entanglements and the imprisonment of the Jedi Order. And he's free of the self-destructiveness of a dark side. So this is why it's a good example of what are going to be the rewards if you go your own path. The rewards are going to be that you'll find a higher path, right? A higher path, which is why it's the higher education in this house, which is why it's associated with philosophers, prophets, people beyond their time, people with a vision, who know meaning, who know secrets of living, which other people don't know about, and they teach these secrets to others. And through their teachings, they become professors. Professors at universities, schools of learning. And they seek out those schools of learning in which they take pupils. And they distribute something which they have learned themselves. They have not learned it in books. These are not the third house teachers. These are not the regular teachers at school that you find just redistributing information. No, they found these wisdoms themselves. And this is why we are preparing from the 9th house to the 10th house, which is the house of wisdom. The 10th house is the peak of worldly consciousness. To get to that peak, we have to find our place in the world through our personal experience. It's a subjective house, which is why it's fire element. And we have certain deities, certain archetypes connected to this fire element, like the deity behind Jupiter, which is Thor, the god of thunder, which strikes his hammer on an anvil from which the divine sparks come, which can create and destroy simultaneously. And we have the example of Zeus from Greek mythology, who channels his will into a lightning bolt that strikes at his enemies. So speed and having a devastating blow is associated with his house. Why is that important? To have a devastating strike is to find the right words, the right knowledge, the knowledge that gets you on the path, that realigns you. It's like, this is what we have to do. This is the law. This is the higher path. This is the road to the truth, to the justice, to the law. Which is why 9 forces are very, very passionate about the truth, finding the correct information in a sea of knowledge, which is why it's connected with scriptures, is connected to the archetypal expression of Moses, and when we go to Mount Sinai, and this guy receives the commandments of God on the mountain, because he receives instructions for how to live. That's the purpose of a 9th house. So if you have a lot of 9th house placements, this is what your planets are trying to do. They're trying to deliver instructions on correct living through authentic observation based on your own experience. These are messages that you have received because you climbed the mountain. You have done the work, you have transformed yourself, you have reconstructed yourself. Now you receive the higher messages, and this is why we are also connecting this to journeys, travel. This is why I say travel more later in the video, because the travel is not understood if you don't understand this. Travel is about adventure, and adventure is about taking an experience to learn something new, but not about the world specifically, but about you, your place in the world, your skills, your purpose for living. And the purpose for living, we also find examples of that in other places. We also find the example of going towards a mountain in Lord of the Rings, where Frodo and Sam deliver the ring to Mount Doom, which is essentially a volcano. And the volcano is where the fire erupts. Once we get to the peak, then the fire comes out, and from the fire we have ashes burning the ground, and from those ashes new soil can be created. So we have a 10th at the mountain peak, and we have also other characters like Han Solo in Star Wars. Why Han Solo? Because he's a daredevil, he's a scoundrel, he does whatever he wants. What he wants, that is his God. Not religion, not other people, not his family, not his friends. No, no, no. What he wants, what he thinks, that goes. So he has his own Millennium Falcon, his own spaceship, which he uses to travel to wherever he wants to go. And he's a smuggler. So he makes his living breaking whatever laws he doesn't care about. This is also something Nine Forces have to do. They have to find the laws that are wrong, to redefine those laws through themselves. And of course you can only do that if you have some kind of experience, some kind of knowledge that you have attained. Otherwise it would be superficial. And superficiality is the last thing that we want in this house. This is the least superficial of all the houses. This is why Nine Forces are extremely honest and direct about what they want and what they do and what they believe. It's all about convictions. And how strong these convictions are going to determine the success of those ninth house planets. If you don't have a strong conviction, it's because you haven't developed. You haven't yet made the journey. You haven't yet done the pilgrimage. You haven't climbed the mountain. You haven't received the scrolls. You haven't channeled the lightning, the spark, the spark of insight. And this is why lightning is associated with the ninth house. Of course, we have Zeus. Everybody knows Zeus wields the lightning. And we also know that Thor gets lightning coming from his hammer. But there's also lightning because it's about insight. Knowledge that comes striking you down like, giving you a sense of direction. Everybody can see where the lightning strikes because it leaves an imprint on where it strikes on the ground. There's also other examples of prophetic vision, of somebody showing you the path, showing you the future, showing you where you have to go. In Lord of the Rings, Elrond shows his vision to Arwen because he has a prophetic vision of her decaying and dying, grieving across the fields of Middle-earth. Because should she decide to stay behind, this is going to be her fate. So the ninth house is also good for fortune tellers, gamblers, people who believe they can tell the future. They know something other people don't know. They can see something, but they don't see it intellectually. They can't explain how they gained this information. It's a psychic house. Despite being fire, yes, fire like water is based on the spirit and soul, which come through visions. And we have a farseer in Dawn of War, somebody who can see what happens next on the battlefield. We also have a character, Bastila, in Knights of the Old Republic, who uses a certain battle meditation to guide the soldiers into battle. Through this meditation, She calms the minds and focuses them. She brings focus to her soldiers, giving them direction so they know exactly how to act, how to live in battle. And this is what allows them to succeed. This is what gets them to win against the Sith. So to overcome darker forces, to overcome that which we have transformed and discovered in the 8th house of secrets and of demons in the closet, we come into the 9th house where we have the vision, where we have the meditation, where we know our path. Because we know ourselves. We know who we are and what we are about. And that is why we are going to succeed against our enemies. This is how we expand and we come out on top. And this is why you see also the top, the mountain again, with Zeus on the mountain of Olympus. And Zeus, if you look at his lightning, it looks a little bit like the sign of Sagittarius, doesn't it? Because this is the house of Sagittarius. It looks like an arrow, but it also looks a little bit like lightning, and it's not a far stretch at all. Because Jupiter, this is what the deity represents, Zeus and Thor. It's about striking devastatingly, having some kind of authority, some kind of power. But it's a personal power, it comes from the inside. It's not based on what you have achieved, you see? In the 9th house, you haven't achieved anything yet. You haven't created anything yet. You have only found yourself. You have discovered. You know how it's also associated with Star Trek? When you go where no man has gone before. Where you explore beyond the reaches of the universe. Past the final frontier. This is where you take Star Trek Enterprise, this ship in this fictional series. And this is also a 9th house thing. To expand your mind, you must go to places where you haven't gone before. And this is how you discover yourself. How will you react? How will you be when you are in that situation? This is how you find yourself. And this is how pilgrimage used to be the traditional way of how people found themselves through finding God, through religion, and so on. And of course, now we're using meditation for that, and this is also why I mention it. But this is about visions. Looking into a crystal ball, knowing what's going to happen next, because you know yourself, so of course you can predict what is your fate. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to accomplish? When you know this, then you have a high functioning 9th house. And you have the higher education of the self. Self-knowledge, self-actualization, through self-exploration. That is why we explore the world. That's why we take adventures. That's why we take spaceship to faraway places. Because we're trying to find ourselves, really. We're just using the world as a vehicle to do that. And now, before we go into the 10th house and establish our empire as an extension of the self first must have a very strong foundation on which to build this empire. Here we find people who have to shout their ideas, who have to preach about them. It's like the Hierophant, or it's the dragon shout in Skyrim. It's when the protagonist absorbs the soul of a dragon, which is the 8th house. Again, it's an 8th house thing, but inner dragon is the inner demon that we slay. Once we have slain the dragon, the 5th house, by the way, is the hero that slays the dragon, but the dragon is not slain until we arrive at the 8th house. After the hero's journey is complete. And now we go on another adventure. Now we find ourselves. And now we shout. We have attained the skills and the magical powers of a dragon. of the demon within, the eighth house, the true identity, which is found in darkness, which is found in loss, which is found in finding our power by discovering our helplessness. Through powerlessness, through death, we get rebirth. Now we have the dragon's powers, and we use them to spread our knowledge to others. And often we can be a bit grandiose about it because we're so confident we have found the truth. Why shouldn't we shout it to the world and tell everybody? This is the Hierophant, and this is what we see exactly in the priest. So people who work in churches preaching to other people, this is the Holy Gospel, this is the Word of God, because they are thoroughly convinced that after all their studies, all their discovery, this is it. They have arrived. And that's why you're ready to go on. When this house is complete, you're ready to go on and create a career for yourself. You create an image for yourself, but an image that is based on the self. Image based on what you believe to be true, to be real about you and the world around you. To leave the Jedi Order, to arrive at the mountain Sinai, to become the king of Olympus, to become the prophet, to become the priest, to become the scoundrel, the smuggler, to become the seer. All of this is exactly the same thing. The philosopher, the explorer, those who go to faraway places, foreign lands, they discover new people. So this is why you also see the traditional meaning of the ninth house being associated with learning about different cultures, faraway places. Because you're learning about faraway things about yourself through others, through the world around you. And then Han Solo in Star Wars, he meets the character Lando Calrissian in a faraway place, which is ironic because he finds him in Cloud City. Cloud City, like, how ironic is that? In the clouds. He finds a foreign friend who betrays him to show Han Solo how arrogant he was and how trusting he was. To trust another scoundrel because he thought he would be like him, and he wasn't. So he found how different Han Solo was, how different he was from other people through this character that he met. But of course, unfortunately, Han Solo gets punished and he gets frozen. And it is not until later that he gets fought out of his cage. But that is a different story. We also have another shadow aspect of the ninth house. Not only do these people trust a little bit too easily, because they have too much faith in themselves, they're a little bit arrogant, because the ego gets inflated, like I said, in the ninth house. Especially if you have Sun in the ninth house, you have to look out for this inflatedness, that you trust your own judgment a little bit too much. Watch out for that. Because in the shadow expression you find characters like Joffrey Baratheon in Game of Thrones, who's a character who does whatever he wants, right? Just like Han Solo, because he believes that he knows better than everybody else, and that other people should be listening to him, even though he's just a stupid child and doesn't know shit. But this is a very typical shadow expression of the ninth house. It's very grandiose, and there's no limit to what he can do and what he wants to do. He doesn't hold himself back. He doesn't consider the consequences of his actions. And that is also why we find gambling, addictions, taking too many risks, being a scoundrel, being a daredevil, being a little bit, going a little bit too far out of your pocket, taking on a little bit too much, more than you can chew. And this is how Joffrey dies, actually. He dies by being poisoned. Because people hate him so much. He's just an unstable influence. He's a destabilizing influence. And that's exactly what we also see in the shadow expression, because it's opposite to Saturn, isn't it? We haven't created our stability yet. We are not at the 10th house. We are at the 9th house. We have not arrived at Saturn yet. So we haven't gotten to the maturity yet. We're still developing that. Because here, we can't even think about being mature. We have to find ourselves first before we can refine that and pull it into wisdom. So we're still growing up. And if we don't look out, if we don't restrict ourselves, if we don't integrate a little bit of Saturn into this house, then we find ourselves falling on our knees, getting into accidents, like I like to say. That is what I mentioned in the beginning of a video. It's associated with accidents because you're a little bit too optimistic, a little bit too eager to go. I mean, this is just a Jupiterian aspect of being so excited about taking on the world like a child in psychology. Every child in the beginning has to be grandiose, has to have a face of being grandiose. So every child has a 9th house face before it grows up into a teenager. Through this grandiosity, it can take on to the world, can explore the world, can take risks, which it needs to take. It has to take those risks. Otherwise, it's never going to find its limits. You're never going to find your boundaries, your 10th house, if you don't take on the world in a grandiose and confident manner. So this is what we see here. This is basically it, yeah. We see the king, we see the priest, the hierophant, the visionary. This is the house of long journeys. This is the house of preachers. This is the house of ego inflation. If you have a lot of 9th house planets, somehow you have to do something where other people will accuse you of being inflated even if you are not. So not only is there the danger of being inflated, but also the danger that if you try to maturely and healthily express the 9th house, it's still gonna appear like a little bit too much to some people. Because that's the nature of this house. So you have to accept that. But the 9th house planet that you have, it has to be a little bit explosive. You know, it's like you're throwing a party. It's like fireworks. Think about fireworks. It's another 9th house thing. Think about a rocket. A rocket, like an arrow, like a lightning. It's the same thing. You take a spaceship into space, you need rocket fuel. You take the rocket and you drift off. And if you take the rocket, you're gonna leave a lot of fire behind. A lot of things are going to be burned. Because you're already matured beyond the 8th house. You're not afraid of losing anything. Are you crazy? You are here because you're ready to take on the world. You're not letting some pesky fears hold you back. It's not going to happen. And that's why other people will assume you're arrogant. Whether you are or not, that's something you have to discover for yourself, and you have to balance those planets out. And how do you balance the 9th house out? It's with a little bit of logic, a little bit of rationality, understanding your limitations, When you understand the limitations of anything that you're meeting, if you understand the vulnerabilities and weaknesses of your ninth house planet, whether it's the Sun, Mars, Venus, or Mercury, or whatever, then you're good to go. Then you can be confident to expand and to go out and to go in hard. Because remember, the ninth house is about tunnel vision. It's about focus. To shoot an arrow and hit the target right where you want it, where you want to hit it. That's the thing. And that's why it's also associated with sports, especially objects that you throw, because if you're shooting somewhere, you have to hit the target. Skill shots. And people are very good at throwing. Even though the ninth house rules the thighs, which isn't the arms, right? But the thighs are how you stabilize yourself. How you find your posture, your station. And for finding your station, where you are, you're aware of your surroundings. And this is how you balance out. Because a lot of ninth houses, they don't pay enough attention to the surroundings. They get a little bit too committed to the tunnel vision. This is the only reason why they go into accidents, like I said. But take a little bit of a third house rationality with you. Don't get distracted, but pay attention to what's around you. Allow yourself to absorb new information. Information that is closer to you. Even if that information seems rather boring and unexciting. But also don't get stuck there. Don't try to be something that you're not. This is not the house of the rational mind. This is the house of faith. It's about applying yourself, trusting yourself. Trust is the foundation for the 10th house. It's not possible to make any meaningful investments into the world around you. It's not possible to commit to a career, and it's not possible to have a confident image projected onto the outside. It's not possible to deal with the scrutiny and the judgment of other people without trust in yourself, without using your own judgment as an organizing principle, as the guiding light of your life. So the ninth house is very good in ignoring other people's feedback, which is what you need to go into the 10th house. I mean, this is a quality that is supposed to be positive. As long as you can keep an open mind, but not so open that your mind is like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded, where everybody can come in. So develop your philosophy. Develop your self-identity. Your identity of what you are supposed to be doing. If you don't know what you are supposed to be doing, then your ninth house is not ready. It's not ready for your career. And it's not ready to deal with public scrutiny. You're not ready to commit to a path. The path is what the ninth house is about. Showing other people the path, teaching them the path, helping them along. It's like the traveling guide. And just like the priest who guides you to God, the traveling guide guides you around in the world. But then also the professor, even the professor of psychology, guides you how to navigate the self. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, that's the whole point. Self-navigation. Think about the navigator on a ship. Think about the helm on board of the Enterprise. It's through the helm that we engage. We go into warp 9. And that is the maximum speed you can have in Star Trek. Warp 9. Like the 9th house. 9 is divine. And that's why it's so connected to religion. I mean, people have no fucking idea how much astrology is everywhere around them, and their ability to recognize that is a ninth house thing. Pattern recognition allows you to understand the meaning of any given situation, and it is only through understanding of meaning can you have prophetic vision and accurate predictions of where the future is heading for you personally. So I hope you like this video about the ninth house in astrology. And if you did enjoy it, please leave a like and a comment and subscribe. Help me boost the algorithm. Help me expand my business. I need you to do it. Thanks for watching.